Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing an analytical deep dive into one of the most complex and honestly devastating conflicts of the 21st century, the evolution of the Boko Haram insurgency. We're going to examine exactly how regional instability and socioeconomic factors transformed what started as a localized religious group into a massive regional security threat.
Think about this for a second. In 2002, a little-known religious movement popped up in northeastern Nigeria. Within just a single decade, it would end up displacing literally millions of people. This raises a fundamental historical question for us. Was this driven by extremist ideology alone, or were crippling poverty and deep political failures essentially the fertile ground that allowed this movement to take root in the first place?
Here is our chronological syllabus for today. First, the roots of the movement. Then, the 2009 turning point, followed by escalation and global impact. After that, we'll cover the civilian abduction crisis, factions and regional dynamics, and finally, the human cost and resilience.
Let's jump into Section 1, Roots of the Movement, Socioeconomic Drivers from 2002 to 2008.
Okay, so our history begins in Maiduguri, Borno State, and looking at the group's early recruitment fundamentally changes how we understand their rise. You see, the founder, Muhammad Yusuf, didn't build his following purely on theology. He absolutely capitalized on severe socioeconomic deprivation. I want you to try and view this era through the eyes of a local community leader at the time. You're watching your entire region suffer from massive unemployment, severely limited educational opportunities, and crumbling infrastructure. Deep economic hardship was just the daily reality. So when Yusuf started preaching blistering critiques of government corruption and offering this vision of moral and religious reform, well, thousands of disenfranchised young Nigerians felt like they finally had a voice.
The group officially called itself Jama'atu Ahli Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad. Translated from Arabic, that means people committed to the propagation of the Prophet's teachings and jihad. They genuinely saw themselves as rigorous reformers. But because of their fierce opposition to Western-style governance and the secular educational system, the locals and media outlets gave them a completely different name, Boko Haram.
Section 2, the 2009 turning point, the spark of escalation.
For years, security agencies kind of just viewed the group as a localized nuisance. But mapping out the early timeline, we can clearly see a shift. After some early clashes in 2003 at a camp in Yobe State, which locals actually nicknamed Afghanistan, the true catalyst happened in July 2009, and it was over something incredibly mundane, a dispute over a motorcycle helmet regulation in Bauchi State. I know, it sounds minor, but this was the spark that ignited an absolute powder keg. It erupted into 5 days of widespread, intense clashes across Borno, Bauchi, Kano, and Yobe states. The fighting only stopped when Muhammad Yusuf was captured by security forces on July 30th.
But here's where things take a dark turn. Shortly after his arrest, Yusuf died while in police custody. Human rights organizations immediately raised serious red flags about this. The crucial takeaway here is that Yusuf's extrajudicial death marked the permanent end of any opportunity for dialogue. It was the absolute point of no return, forcing the movement to mutate into a new, irreversible, and far more violent phase.
Section 3, Escalation and Global Impact, the rise of a Boko Shako.
Following that 2009 crackdown, the group briefly went underground before re-emerging in 2010. But this time, they were under Yusuf's deputy, Abu Bakr Shakau, and the shift in their operational strategy was, frankly, horrific. Look at the contrast here. Early tactics under Yusuf relied heavily on preaching, localized anti-corruption messaging, and sporadic clashes with police. But under Shakau, the group hard pivoted to massive prison breaks, coordinated suicide bombings, and devastating acts of international terrorism. They were no longer preaching reform, they were actively waging a full-scale war against the state.
And this timeline of escalation proves it. After a massive prison break in 2010, they bombed the Nigeria Police Force headquarters in June 2011. But the moment that truly shook the globe happened just 2 months later, in August 2011, when they brazenly attacked the United Nations headquarters in Abuja. This specific attack stunned the international community. Actually, it proved definitively that Boko Haram was no longer just a regional political issue. It was a full-blown international terrorist threat. This rapidly escalating violence ultimately forced the Nigerian president to declare a formal state of emergency across Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states in May 2013, which triggered a massive regional military response.
Section 4, the Civilian Abduction Crisis, the Chibok schoolgirls in 2014.
Now, while military strategies were being drawn up in capitals around the world, the true burden of this insurgency fell squarely on innocent civilians. On the nights of April 14th and 15th, 2014, the insurgency carried out an act that absolutely horrified the world. They abducted more than 270 schoolgirls from the government girls' secondary school in Boko. Let's step back into the shoes of a local community leader for a second. Imagine the sheer terror of waking up to find your town's secondary school completely emptied of its daughters. Imagine the agonizing helplessness as heavily armed militants simply vanished into the forest with them. It's a level of civilian trauma that is almost impossible for us to quantify.
This abduction gave birth to the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, drawing intense outrage from world leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens everywhere. But, while the hashtag trended for a while and eventually faded from Western news cycles, the agony for the local families didn't stop. It remained a grueling daily reality. For years, entire communities waited in this agonizing limbo, not knowing the fate of their children. Some were eventually rescued, yes, but a tragic number remained missing, which just underscores the deep, enduring human impact of this conflict.
And here's another critical piece of the puzzle. While global attention was totally fixated on Chibok, the militants were rapidly advancing on the ground. By early 2015, they had seized an estimated 20,000 square miles of territory. To put that into perspective, that is an area roughly the size of Belgium. They expanded across Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states. Emboldened by capturing over a dozen local government areas, Abubakar Shako formally declared a caliphate in August 2014, signaling his intent to completely replace the Nigerian state in the territories they controlled.
Section 5. Factions and Regional Dynamics. Shifts from 2015 to 2021.
This massive territorial grab was a wake-up call that forced neighboring countries to step in. This shifted foreign alliances and triggered intense internal ideological rifts within the insurgency itself. In March 2015, facing serious regional military pushback, the group pledged allegiance to ISIS, rebranding themselves as the Islamic State West Africa Province, or ISWAP. But this alliance actually fractured the movement. By August 2016, ISIS officially recognized a new leader, Abu Musab al-Barnawi. Shekau violently rejected this demotion and formed his own splinter faction. These two groups fought both the Nigerian state and each other for supremacy, a really bloody rivalry that finally culminated in May 2021 when Abubakar Shekau died following intense clashes with rival ISWAP forces. His death marked the end of a very dark and violent chapter of leadership.
Section 6. Human Cost and Resilience. Rebuilding Shattered Communities.
Through all these shifting factional lines and military maneuvers, we absolutely must center the narrative on what truly matters: the staggering human cost. International organizations report this conflict has left millions of displaced persons living in temporary camps. It has created absolutely massive humanitarian needs, caused generational disruptions to education, and plunged these communities into even deeper economic hardship. The socioeconomic despair that originally fueled Yusuf's movement way back in 2002, it has only been exponentially worsened by decades of violence.
Yet the most vital part of this history isn't the tragedy. It's the story of community survival. Despite living through unimaginable terror, the people of northeastern Nigeria refuse to be broken. Local teachers bravely reopened temporary classrooms for traumatized children. Families painstakingly returned to burned-out villages to rebuild their homes brick by brick. Healthcare workers continued serving massive displaced populations under intensely dangerous conditions. This is the true legacy of the region. Ordinary citizens showing extraordinary resilience, choosing to rebuild their lives against literally all possible odds.
Which brings us to our concluding thought today. The history of this insurgency teaches us a really critical lesson. A military response might be necessary, but security alone is never enough to defeat an ideology born from despair. We have to ask ourselves, how do we build sustainable peace through opportunity, justice, and education? How do we ensure the root causes of insurgency are eradicated for good? Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis. If you found this historical deep dive valuable, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel right now so you never miss our future explorations into the complex forces shaping our world.